Welcome back. So I feel like this is kind of starting to become a sort of a progression series and me learning how to do these 3D card arts. And as you saw in my previous videos, we started off with this Trapinch, right? Where I learned a lot from the Trapinch where something could be really basic and you could still do a lot with it. One thing I also found out as well too is that you could do like resin work with this. So how some people get like the clear bubbles on it on like the level stars and stuff like that is when they actually put resin on it, which I don't really plan to work with resin, maybe in the future. But yeah, the Trapinch I definitely learned a lot for my first card, and then the Stardust Dragon I learned a lot too on just how to get better at it and having just like more details, more layers, and working with like hollow foils. And then the next one we're gonna work on actually is gonna be the elemental hero Flame Wingman. This one's going to be a little bit trickier, but I do have a few things up my sleeve that I did learn just to show. I did have a Harpy's Feather Duster that I cut up from a Korean card, and I noticed that even if a card is like this where you could give it a little bit more depth by just cutting it so it makes it look a little bit more 3D as long as you color the edges. So that's one trick that I might apply to trying to use it for the elemental here, Flamewingman, and we'll see where it goes from there. This one's going to be also a little bit harder as well too, compared to finding cheaper cards where like the Stardust Dragon or Trapinch where they're less than $1. Flamewingmans actually have not gotten a lot of reprints, so at minimum you're looking at, for the hollow ones, like $10, $12, $13 each or more, even for like a damaged one. They did reprint the dual terminal one, which I might end up using 1 or 2 copies of, but I don't really like the dual terminal foiling. So I'm going to have to think about whether or not I want to cut up some Flame Wingmans, like 1 or 2 damaged secret rares, and then we'll go from there. One solution I did find though is that I actually found a lot of copies of just Korean ones since they're pretty much inexpensive and worthless. And I'm gonna use these to cut up to get a foil version of the Flame Wingman. The problem with that is that I want to have the English text and the secret rare foiling for the level stars, as well as the English text in the text box, which you can't do the same with the Korean cards. So I'm gonna have to find a way to, I guess, get really cheap versions of it, because it kind of really bothers me if those parts are in English, but we'll see. Alright, as for the actual gameplay on how I plan to do this card. So after cutting up the Harpy's Feather Duster and getting that sort of effect on there, I figured, why don't I just do the same with the Flame Wingman's wings, and then also with his hand with the dragon head as well too. Originally what I would have done was I would have cut 2 separate layers there, but I think what I could do is for like the small pieces of the dragon head coming out, rather than actually having an extra layer, I'm wondering if I could just kind of cut it and then bend it backwards, and maybe it could work like that to give it more of like a 3D effect, and we'll see. But the wings, I definitely think that I could kind of cut them in a way where it bends forward. Same for the bottom wing there, and then I could have hit 1 layer for his body. The first layer will probably be the hand there, and I'll find a way to cut out the teeth so that way I could bend it back. And then the second layer will be the body, since his hand goes in the front of the wings. And the third layer behind that will be this part where the wing kind of bends out and looks a little bit more 3D. And then behind that will be the tail, which I'll kind of try to figure out how to make the tail look more dynamic. As for the actual background of the card, I still haven't thought about it yet, since this background is actually very simple, but I'm going to try to find some blank background secret rares and then we'll go from there. Okay, so while doing this, I actually already encountered my first problem. If anyone ever plans to use Korean cards, it doesn't work, kind of, because Korean cards, their borders are actually not cut the same way as American cards, where their pictures for the cards are actually a lot smaller than American cards. So I'm gonna need to think of some creative way to like cut the border so that way I could just glue it onto another piece to make this work. But yeah, so this kind of puts a damper on my plans, but we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so I made some progress. So again, we left off with, I did the arm already. Let me now mix these pieces together. I did the arm, and I have the body cut out, right? So what I ended up doing next was, where is this? I ended up cutting the wings out, the front of wings, to make it a little bit more dynamic, and then I glued that part to the front of the card. So that way what I'm gonna do is, when I stack all of these together, it'll look like that. So that'll be the front wing. And then what I'm gonna do is glue the what's supposed to happen is I'm gonna glue the front of Flame Wingman there, and then what he's gonna do is go behind the card here. It goes behind the card, and then his hand covers over there where part of the wing comes out, and that's how it's gonna be attached. So once I glue everything together, hypothetically, then this layer will go on top. So this is a lot more work as opposed to if I was to just have English cards. In hindsight, I should just wait for dual terminal cards. So it should end up looking something like this once everything's together, which I think looks pretty good. But let's just see how many layers I need to make it look nicer, I guess. Okay, so just an update. I was gonna give up, and I was actually very frustrated, and I did end up coming up with a solution. So what I ended up doing was cutting up, since the borders don't match up on the Korean cards, what I did was I actually cut up pieces of the cards and ended up gluing it to the back of it to somehow make it sort of fit in there. So there you go. You see how, I have the arm of the Flame Wingman there. And then what I'm thinking of planning to do is I'm going to glue the base of the Flame Wingman here. I'm going to glue it and then have some kind of foam backer to stick it onto the arm. The problem I'm having now is I actually just cut out the wings here on the border, which I'm going to glue onto the back of the card. But I have to find some way that this border still lines up with the actual card itself, with having the front of the wing coming out as well too. So I'm trying to figure that out. But Korean cards do work, but it takes a lot more work than if it was to use with English cards. But yeah, that's just an update. And then after I kind of have everything together, I finished the back of the wings. Then I'm gonna do the count as usual to show you how many layers I ended up using. Alright, so just an update, and just to kind of show that, sometimes these things don't really work out the way you want them to work out. I ended up actually redoing it, and I actually found out what the issue was. The issue isn't the fact that they're Korean cards. The issue is that I actually had my secret rare regular American version lined up, and it's the fact that I think older fusion cards are different from newer cards, or just fusion cards in general have different frames. So this kind of goes back to the idea that if you're gonna do this, you're probably better off with the same copy of the same card. As for, I think I'm kind of almost done. It's not as 3D as I would want it to be. I might try to space it out with like a little bit of a foam backer there. And then I still can't decide between using the Galaxy Cyclone as a background card, or I actually also have Brilliant Fusion, but it looks like a little bit too busy, or I might end up using Dragon Ravine. But we'll see. Let's just go ahead and finish cutting it up first. Oh, I also wanted to point out that I ended up doing the tail already, and I'm waiting for the super glue to dry. So what I ended up doing is cut out the tail, and then I used one of these like foam strip things where you get to cut out just like a piece of foam that's like around this thick, and you just stick it onto the back. What I plan to do is once it dries, I'm planning to just bend it backwards so it ends up looking like a lot more 3D, I guess. But so far I would say it's coming out pretty good. I need to make it a little bit thicker so I could bend it further back, so it gives it like a little bit more of an effect to it. And again, I'm still deciding between the backgrounds. I might actually end up using the Brilliant Fusion, even though it looks a little bit busy, but it does look really cool. Alright, thank you. And we'll cut to the next part when I'm getting closer to finishing. Alright, I'm finally done. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like in the display case, and I hope you enjoy it. One thing I do want to point out though is if you're working with like super glue and ink, you're going to end up with like ink and super glue like all over your hands, and every time I do it, it takes me like forever to wash these things out. And also, I just got to reiterate, you're probably better off doing this in separate batches and not trying to do this all in one day. Because every time I always end up trying to do this all in one day, and there's so many parts which I'm going to highlight later on that I probably could have done a lot better. But I hope you enjoy looking at it. Alright, so we're finally done, and I just kind of wanted to go over my thoughts on doing the Flame Wingman, as well as just my progression in general. If you watched the previous videos, I learned how to do it with the Trapinch, and overall I would say the Trapinch was not as detailed as I wanted to be. There's a lot of things, part of the learning process, that I actually had to do. I would say Pokemon cards overall are a lot easier because they're not as detailed and they're very, very, very big. As for like getting a hold of commons, I didn't have an issue with Pokemon because like for the most part, Pokemon cards are very, very, very cheap as opposed to getting like certain Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I would say in comparison, the Stardust Dragon, I would say I feel like I did really good on this one, where it turned out a lot better than I thought just because of how the layers worked out. But again, that was also because of the fact that the Stardust Dragon was very, very cheap. I was able to get the commons for it for like less than 10 cents each, and I was able to get like 20 of these. And the background, I ended up just using a regular one. And for the Stardust Dragon, I only pretty much needed one of the foil ones to kind of get that foil effect on the body. So that wasn't bad. And then I was able to, since there were so many copies, it didn't matter if I was able to cut the front, do the border and everything. So that was I feel like that one, the Stardust Dragon, turned out pretty good. As opposed to the Flame Wingman, at the end of the day, I feel like I still liked how it turned out. It looks really good. Especially with the Brilliant Fusion. I actually like the Brilliant Fusion background. So I guess one tidbit I would probably add is like, you could choose whatever background you want to use as long as you think it looks nice. For me, I just ended up looking for secret rares and what had like a nice background to it. And this turned out pretty good. The problem I had with the Flame Wingman was that these cards were really expensive. So outside of using cheap Korean ones, there really was no better option. As for like the front part, even if I wanted to cut out the name and everything, it just would cost me way too much to do it, so I really don't think it was worth it. As for layers, so what I ended up doing was, for the front layer, I actually didn't need to have that much to actually. I did like 1 or 2 cards in between, outside of like the fact that I was running out of cards to do it. I ended up just cutting this part out and taping it to the back of the card, and then gluing it together. And then in between that layer, I had like a couple of cards where like 1 or 2 cards before I had the body of the Flame Wingman. As you saw, I glued it to the front of the card and then just packed them all together. I have 1 layer for the front of the wings, another layer for the back of the wings. It wasn't too clean, as you see. You could kind of see like the extra layer of the wings there. But to be honest, what I feel like is you don't need too clean of a cut on the body of these cards. You may think like, oh, it might stand out to have like part of it like still not fully cut, but the fact that when you have like foil cards and then once you use a marker to color the black of the border, you actually just don't notice it at all. I mean, the side part, one fix I think you could do is you could just get like black tape, like masking, black like electrical tape or something like that, wrap it all the way around and just cut the edges so that way the sides of it is covered to make it look a little bit more clean. I could probably do that. One other tidbit as well to I noticed is, as you see here, like all this like tiny bit of residue, you could kind of see it. When you're working with like super glue, it's very easy to leave residue on the card, so you have to be really, really careful. In this case, like I said, I really wanted the English. I didn't want like the Korean card name on the front. I think it looks way better with English. I just didn't have any spares left to do it, and there's no way I'm paying $10-$20 to get one of those cards. In this case, I got this first edition Legendary GX collection card. It was damaged. It was like $5 or something like that, and it just fit my purposes. But overall, I would say this process of learning how to do 3D cards actually turned out pretty well, and I kind of really enjoy it, especially if the fact that if you have some kind of Yu-Gi-Oh collection that you plan to do like a display for, I think these are like kind of really, really neat pieces you could do to have on your display. But aside from that, that's it. And I'm not really sure if I'm going to do more of these, depending on if I find a card that I really like, that I really want to do. Hopefully I can find like some cheap cards that I could use to do these projects. So if you want to see more of these, then let me know. I'll look into doing more. But overall, I really made these videos for the fact that I really don't think people should pay hundreds or like $500-$600 just to have someone do these for them, because as you can see, like even for someone like me that's not doing it perfectly, you could make these cards and they look really, really, really good, as long as the main thing is just learning how to do it first with like really common cards like the Trapinch, and then just working your way up to the card that you want to do. And at the end of the day, you don't need to copy someone else on how they do it. You don't need to copy me on how I do it. The main thing is just getting the basic down, and then after that, it's pretty much just as far as your imagination can take you. But yeah, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, let me know. Leave a like, comment, or whatever it is. Thank you everyone that's been subscribing, and have a great day.